This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast, and on this episode, we discuss how determining an area in Cleveland is ascending, descending, or stagnant changes from block to block. You have to know the ins and outs of the city and neighborhoods to make a proper investment. Reilly and Mike Ferrante talk about this and much more in this episode, so stay tuned.
All right, good morning, everybody. It's a bright blue sky outside here in Cleveland, a little nippy at 35 degrees, but we're starting to get into our 50s and 60s next week as spring hits Cleveland. And with me is my partner in crime, quote unquote, Mike Ferrante. Mike, good morning.
Hi, Mike. Always a pleasure to be on with
you. Got me up at the crack of dawn because you're such a busy beaver.
I did. Yes. I appreciate you doing this in the morning.
Yeah.
But you've already had your cup of tea, so I know you're ready to go.
I know. That's my English wife of 40 years. So, I can't function unless I start out with the tea and then move up to coffee. Although I hear tea has got more caffeine than coffee. But anyways, well, let's take a temperature check of the real estate market as we literally are getting into the spring market. So where are we sitting, Mike? The temperature of the Cleveland market.
Yeah, so I just ran some numbers. I do a monthly update, and I do a big picture, kind of Northeast Ohio update. Prices continue to rise. Inventory continues to drop. Mike, I did a quick study on the 5-year median price in Cuyahoga County and how much it has risen. I'm going to put you on the spot and say, take a wild guess. How much you think the median price in all of Cuyahoga County has risen in the last 5 years?
I'm going to say 20%.
Okay, this is sale price, and you're close, 61%, Mike.
I'm close. Okay.
But that's what's happening. And I'll tell you, a lot of that appreciation happened in Cleveland proper. So when you get out into the suburbs, a city like Solon, for example, they've had about 35% appreciation. But where some of the appreciation has happened has been in the inner city, where homes were selling for $20,000 and now they're selling for $60,000.
You know what's interesting about the market? It reinforces my thinking that there are pockets in Cleveland area proper that are becoming white hot. So when you give me that number of 60%, what it is probably 80% in areas like Little Italy, which is in Cleveland proper, and maybe in the University Circle area, where in 5 years, the prices have almost doubled. But if you get into that west, certain areas of Cleveland, which is really more kind of ghetto-y, I don't think the prices maybe jumped maybe 10, 20%, from like 50,000 to 60,000.
Yeah. And the converse is true too, Mike. So you take a look at a city like Gates Mills. And for those of you who don't know what Gates Mills is, it's kind of our rural Beverly Hills-ish kind of area. Not Beverly Hills like it's sleek and stylish, like where all the shopping is, but it's like these big 1 to 5 acre estates with these massive homes. Everyone thinks, oh, high home values. The Gates Mills hasn't appreciated all that much. I don't have the exact number, but I'm going to guess it's only around 15% or 10% because the values were already so high out there. They really didn't have any room to go up.
Right. They were not slaughtered in the recession crash in 08, 09, 2010. Right. There wasn't a lot of speculative buying like there was in the Cleveland, because in parts of Cleveland Heights, there was a real bubble there.
Oh yeah, you lost 2% value.
Right. So if you're losing in those bubble areas, you're going from houses that were selling for $150, and these people wake up and now it's only worth $90,000. You've already had a price decrease of almost 75, 60%. So what's happening is the prices are coming back a little bit more, and they're settling somewhere in the mean, but it's also increased a little bit. So what we're seeing is not a real bubble anymore. The prices are returning to their real value, I think.
Some would say where they should be and then appreciating from there. I mean, that's one way I've heard it put, where they should be, market value is market value. But yeah, you're right. They've recovered everything that they lost. and now we're again on the upswing.
So it's doing is it's reinforcing my theory that I've raised in these podcasts, which is it's important that the prices that you target these areas and prices that are in the beginning of ascending. It's like in stock picking, your portfolio would go through reallocations into different sectors. And this is what's going on in real estate in Cleveland. So for people that, like, we have a new client in LA, and she's looking for long-term investment, building some wealth. So Cleveland real estate is appealing to her, but she's got a scattershot approach to it. She's looking at all neighborhoods the same, when in reality, all neighborhoods are not the same. I mean, even within the neighborhood, there could be, a couple blocks that are really starting to trend up, but you go a couple blocks over and that's a stagnant area.
Yeah.
So
block to block, street to street. I mean, literally Cleveland Heights. We could talk about, we've looked at houses on Altamont, DeSoto, a lot of rentals in that area. So what's the upside there really?
I think one of the factors I'm starting to realize with Altamont, DeSoto, as opposed to Kensington and Oakdale, if you listeners out there want to go to your Google Maps, what's interesting about Kensington and Oakdale, that's in that Meadowbrook Lee area. There is a tremendous amount of restaurants, coffee shops, the libraries there, the Cedar Lee Theater's there. And so there's a very vibrant urban center in that neighborhood. You go out to Altamont and DeSoto, there's nothing there.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if you were an Orthodox Jewish person, there's a real vibrant Orthodox community there. But the closest thing you are to is Severance, which is now ghost town.
Yeah.
The only thing hopping at Severance is Home Depot.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So, where are you going to go for takeout? And so in those areas, you have a higher concentration of, first of all, you have a higher concentrations of duplexes, but a different kind of tenant is in those duplexes. But it's definitely a whole different makeup of renters in that area as opposed to the Meadowbrook and Lee.
Yeah. And Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head. In that area, there's a lot of duplexes. And what do you have in duplexes? It's renters. As opposed to east of Taylor, you have a lot more owner occupied properties. Now, of course, there's going to be your normal percentage of renters versus owner occupied. And when you look at the city, they don't break it up into, well, this block is this, percentage. But certainly we know from experience, like where the pockets are, where you have more owner occupied type properties and where the values might tend to be more stable. And to kind of add on your point is that, remember, buying real estate is not just numbers on paper. How many stories have we told where the investor says, oh, but here are the numbers on this property? Well, numbers on paper don't tell the whole story. And that kind of encapsulates what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. I think one of the most important things, if you're a investor in Cleveland real estate and you're looking for a 5-year plan where you're going to be generating cash flow. And I was talking to a guy earlier this week, actually from Switzerland, who was invested in Indianapolis, which I think is a really good area. But Cleveland is where Indianapolis was maybe 5 years ago. And so he's turning his attention to Cleveland. He's looking for what you would call passive income, right? He's not looking to flip it. He's just looking to generate cash flow. The most important thing is for these duplexes to make sure that you have steady money coming in every month where people aren't missing their payment, they're not late with their payment. And that is the most important part of where you buy. Now, if you're buying in that Meadowbrook Lee area, you're going to be dealing with a lot of millennials, a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s, professionals, single people working at the clinic, residents, whatever. These people are not going to miss their payment. Okay. And then as opposed to DeSoto and Altamont area, where the rents are actually going to be less, where in Meadowbrook and Lee, you probably can get rents close to $1,100. The same size place in DeSoto, you're looking at $750, $850 a month, and a definite different category of tenant. Now, I'm not trying to discriminate against lower income tenants, but I'm looking at, all right, now where did these people live prior? And then we're more interested in talking to their landlords than we are looking necessarily at the credit score, because the credit score, yeah, they could have had some bumps along the road. They got laid off during the COVID, but they always made their rent payment to the landlord. And
Yeah.
if they, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, Mike, and it's not an indictment of the tenants in this case. I think where it really comes into play in the real estate conversation is the price of the property. That's why on DeSoto, we sold a duplex that admittedly needed a little bit of work for 110,000. And by comparison, in the neighborhoods that you're talking about, the Meadowbrook, we sold one on Meadowbrook for like 150. Okay, and the rents were higher. But why is that? The value is higher both because the rents are higher and the neighborhood is different. So we're not saying good or bad necessarily as it pertains to tenants. It's just, what do you want to buy? Are you buying penny stocks or are you buying IBM? I guess is the comparison I would make.
Well, you know what, good and bad. Let me just put it to you differently. We're looking at. It's apples and oranges, because when you go into that Altamont DeSoto area, you've got to look at the tenants differently. I mean, God knows, what in the contracting business 40 years ago, I started realizing that the people I thought had money didn't. The people that I didn't think money, I mean, when you finished painting the rooms, painting the garage, doing the fix up that your contract, that money was waiting for you on the kitchen table, as opposed to the guy out in your neck of the woods, out in Barrington, one of these McMansions and whatever. This guy is leveraged up to the hilt. So he's constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul, even though he's living in $1 million house. He's, that old adage about the millionaire next door. We'd have to send endless bills. Oh yeah, checks in the mail. So yeah, I look with the jaundiced eye at the so-called millionaire lifestyle as to whether I'm going to have a problem getting paid, as opposed to the working class customers, which has been our bread and butter for years, in terms of gutter cleaning and electrical and plumbing repairs. But still, when you look at the DeSoto Altamont tenant, the credit score is secondary to whether they prioritize paying the rent. And that, talking to the landlord, is always the best way of judging. And also stability.
Sure.
And they're moving. Now that is an A+ tenant.
Yeah. Like, let me put my real estate broker hat on for 1 second and just say, for the record, anyone listening to the podcast, of course, you always have to take into consideration fair housing laws. That's something that local, state, and federal governments take really seriously. So we're not suggesting that you skirt fair housing laws, of course, but there are considerations when buying and renting properties as to what your standards can be and should be. So just wanted to state that for the record. In no way are we saying not to follow fair housing laws.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And you're always looking at I'm not even talking. I mean, hey, I live in Cleveland Heights. Okay. I mean, you can't get more diverse than that. I grew up here. I live here. I don't want to move from here. I love the diversity, and I'm not just trying to be politically correct, but I'm also telling my listeners, so look, this is what the real deal is here.
And of course, it's not just race and religions and all that kind of stuff. There's a whole lot that goes into the fair housing stuff. I think the important thing for landlords to understand is they have a set of standards and stick to them. It's when you start saying, well, I like this person because of A, B, or C. You got to have those standards, the things you're talking about, the landlord references, the steadiness of the income, the length of employment. All those things are factors that are allowed to be considered when weighing your tenant options.
All right, let's flip it over to the other side, like Kensington. I mean, we had a kind of a nightmare scenario trying to get that place rented. And we had a young woman who was literally crying over the phone that she needed to have this house because, landlord was moving out. She gave us some money down, and then I had to reject a Marine Corps veteran. Guy was like 30 years old. We loved him, but he was still on the fence. So we took the bird in the hand versus the two in the bush, and then she pulled the rug out from under us.
Ugh.
Yeah. And so flaky Karen story. She got something else, and she gave us her word. We were about to send the contract out. We said no to this guy. So the standards that I apply to maybe our young millennials is the flaky standard. How flaky is this person? Okay. Versus somebody who may be, in the Marine Corps or whatever. You know what? And thank you, Mike, for watching my back, but you've got to be able to look at the whole person, the whole situation. But let's face it, the most important thing as a landlord is the quality of the tenant you're bringing in. You're really looking for indicators. And for most people, they just look at the credit score. And that's a very limited vision. So
Yeah, I think it's also really important to look at eviction history, criminal history. Length of time on the job can be a consideration. All these things, and the landlord reference, Mike. You've said that a couple times now, but I think the putting some weight on landlord references is important. Now, of course, all the people who are saying, "Well, I'm trying to get my first apartment," are probably up in arms. But there can be other factors to weigh there, because sure, everybody needs their first apartment. I'm not saying that's the only thing to look at, but it should be a consideration.
Well, we had some of our best tenants for years coming out of the crash. And these people's credit scores were in the tank.
Yeah.
But the one black mark against their credit score was the fact that they went through bankruptcy,
Or a
because
foreclosure.
They had to walk away from the house. They were 30,000 under. Yeah, they got swept up in the undertow. I had one tenant, Raheem, and his wife, who lived on our Cumberland property. They were the A+ tenants. They were in my top 5 tenants, along with Mike Roman, who I hope is listening to it, who went through bankruptcy because he started his own business. 2 credit scores that were in the tank, but then when he did a deep dive into the makeup of that credit score, you saw that they always were making their payments on their utilities, on the cell phone, on this and that, and the housing was what was killing them. So they couldn't buy a house. They wanted to buy a house. They wanted to be home buyers. So they lived at our Cumberland property for 3 years. It was like clockwork. The rent was always there. And so and we had that a couple of our other tenants who got swept up in the undertow of the crash. I'm not going to say it wasn't their fault, but they're paying for college education. They were encouraged to borrow money against their house to pay for college, and then all of a sudden their housing values collapse.
Yeah.
So whose fault is that?
We were saying people were using their homes like ATM machines. That was your quote.
Right. And they were. But you know what? They were encouraged to do that. You go
For
back
sure.
in time and look at those ads. So, I think one of our earlier podcasts, I counseled a relative of mine and also a couple other people to simply stop paying on the mortgage. Just stop paying. Just sit there for 2 years. Collect your money, put your money away, put it in a mattress, and be prepared to exit, and be prepared to go into the wilderness with your credit score for a couple of years. But you're going to come out of it in the long run, like, if you were on corporate America, you'd be lionized as a corporate buccaneer. I mean, how many airlines have we heard declared bankruptcy? That was no black mark against them.
Right.
They wanted to get out from under their pension obligations. They declared bankruptcy. A lot of people got screwed, but they were hailed on Wall Street as visionaries. So yeah, I'm telling my average Joe middle class customers, I'm saying, hey, just walk away. Stop paying. Live there, And when it comes time to move, just be prepared to jump into a rental. And that's how the last 10 years have been. Now it's beginning to stabilize, and property values are coming up, but they're coming up in different blocks within Cleveland Heights. And final thought on DeSoto and Altamont. That area could be a great pickup a couple years down the road, a great pickup. I'm talking about 100% return on your investment if Severance is developed. Severance is bulldozed and turned into a sort of like a series of mini shops and boutiques and coffee shops and stuff like that. Because now from Altamont and DeSoto and what's that other street there? There's 3 streets in a row that are, west of Taylor, between Taylor and Lee. Everything in that sector would just explode in value if there was something to walk to there.
Yeah, walkability is one of the big things that home buyers are looking for now.
That's why the Royal Heights, people, get your Google Maps, put me on pause, go over to the Royal Heights, Kingston, Queenston, Canterbury in 44118 zip code. 5 years ago, if you had bought property there, it would have doubled easily 5 years ago. Take a look at the makeup. Look at that Google map and go to the corner of Fairmont and South Taylor. Everybody on Queenston, Kingston, Canterbury, and Princeton walks to that little corner. Coffee shop, bread store, yoga studio, restaurants, and it's the making of that neighborhood. So stabilizing the vacant housing, making sure that landlords are held to standards in terms of how they maintain their house is going to help lay a foundation, develop the retail. I'm talking too much. Go ahead, Mike. You go.
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. I pulled up the map while you were talking. The other 2 streets that are over there by Altamont and DeSoto are Beechwood and Berkeley. But I'll tell you, just knowing those streets, Altamont and DeSoto have the most number of duplexes. Berkeley and Beechwood, while I would still consider them part of that neighborhood, there are fewer duplexes on those streets. So, but still, we're west of Taylor versus east of Taylor, owner-occupied rentals.
I feel like I'm on CNBC's halftime report. I'm giving people stock tips on this podcast, like where to buy. Okay, I'm giving this to you free. If you call me personally, it'll cost you a bottle of wine. And my client in LA, she knows what I'm talking about. I saved her ass from making a disastrous purchase. And in return, she was kind enough to send my wife and I a great bottle of red. But here's a stock tip for you real estate sleuths out there. Superior Park Drive, which is next to Kane Park. This is a little pocket of homes that is beautiful homes. Go on Google Maps and take a street view of Superior Park. You're going to see on the south side is Kane Park, and then on the north side are these homes. They're all custom built, funky little artistic kind of properties, one of a kind builds, and I think that is on the cusp of coming on strong, especially with the rise of what's going on Lee Road, which is not that far away. You got Doug Katz's Zug Ghost Restaurant, you got Zagara's down there, and you got the Bottle Shop. So you look at the whole area. It's farthest away from Severance, so you're not in a ghost town. It's close to the Orthodox community, so you have a bedrock of property values there, thanks to the Orthodox Jewish population. But you're just on the fringe of an area which I think could start popping, and those could be those streets south of
South
Superior, because now you're getting into Cedar Taylor could be coming along and developing, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and Kane Park is cool too. Hopefully this year we'll start to see the concerts there and the events, the art festivals, and all that kind of stuff. So I agree. I do love that area.
Well, in Wall Street terms, they talk about the coming out stocks, which would be the cruise lines, the hotels, Disney World, and the last 3 months since the announcement of all these vaccines, those stocks have appreciated 70-80%, cruise lines from the depths. And this is where you have to look at Cleveland real estate, the pockets, the sectors, even within the sector. And I think that Superior Park and those areas close to Cedar Lee, as these small little shops come out of the virus, they could begun their own little renaissance. And so you could be looking at strong appreciations of 30-40% over the next couple of years, and a better quality of tenant, a more millennial oriented tenant. Mike, we were going to talk about
I was thinking the same thing.
IRA investing, but once again we got sidetracked. But next Saturday, I do want to touch on that. But I do want we're going to tell a couple of stories of some of the negotiations you're in for selling these properties, and we will make sure that names are scrubbed out and locations are scrubbed out. But you've got a couple of interesting negotiations going on, and a little sneak preview. The topic will be about, if you're in a white hot market, when do you take your money off the table? When do you take that offer, as opposed to getting greedy and trying to keep up in the price? And you're in the middle of a couple negotiations like that, and one of them is not going well. The person should have taken that offer. Now they've just discovered problems with the house, and now they're wishing they could have taken it off. But we're just getting everybody a little
taste.
A little taste of what we're going to be talking about.
That's right. And definitely we need to circle back to the idea of investing your self-directed IRA in real estate as a potential option. Yeah. So we got a couple of good ones coming up, don't we?
Yeah. And, taxes have been delayed till May as opposed to April.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, if you know where to invest, like I said, I keep saying, if you know what neighborhoods to invest, then that IRA, self-directed IRA, will be a great topic. So, all right.
Excellent. Well, it's a pleasure as always.
Okay, Mike, go sell some houses.
All right, I'm on it. Take care.
Okay, I'll see you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. Find all of our episodes at Reilly-Properties.com or on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.